Have you ever found yourself tied to someone who drains your spirit, yet you keep going back, not because you want to, but because something inside feels chained to them? That's trauma bonding. And let me tell you, if it doesn't just happen to weak people, it happens to strong, decent, kind-hearted people, people who give, who love deeply, who stand for loyalty. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous when a decent person gets caught in the trap of a narcissist's false love. It rarely feels like a trap at the beginning. In fact, it feels like the opposite. It feels like sunshine finally breaking through after a long stretch of cloudy days. You meet this person and they shower you with attention, with compliments, with the kind of energy that makes you feel seen in a way you've always longed for. They remember small details about you. They text you constantly. They tell you how different you are from anyone else they've ever met. And at first, your heart soaks it up. You think, finally, someone who understands me, someone who values me. That initial rush feels like love, but it's actually the very first layer of the trap. A simple example from daily life shows how this plays out. Imagine you've just started a new job. The first week, your boss comes to your desk every day, praising your work. You're exactly what we've been waiting for, they say. You start to believe this is the healthiest workplace you've ever been part of. But as the weeks go on, those compliments fade. Now, the boss only shows up when you've made a mistake. Suddenly, the warmth and praise that made you feel so secure is gone, and you're scrambling, working overtime, bending over backwards, not because the job requires it, but because you're desperate to get that original approval back. That's what the narcissist does in relationships. They create a high at the beginning, and then they start to ration it, controlling when and how you get it, until you're addicted to their scraps of attention. The tragic beauty here is that this trap works best on good-hearted, loyal people. Why? Because a decent person is naturally forgiving. They give the benefit of the doubt. They think, maybe they had a bad day, or maybe if I try harder, they'll love me the way they did in the beginning. That hope becomes the very chain that keeps them stuck. And the narcissist knows it. They know that every little moment of kindness, every sudden burst of charm is enough to reset the cycle and make you forget the pain. Think about how we train dogs, for example. If you give a dog a treat every single time it sits, the dog learns quickly. But if you give the treat randomly, sometimes rewarding, sometimes not, the dog becomes obsessed. It keeps sitting, keeps trying, keeps hoping because the next treat might come. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the strongest forms of conditioning in psychology. That's exactly what a narcissist does with love. One day you're their whole world, the next you're invisible, and the not knowing keeps you hooked. And let's be honest, it's easy for outsiders to say, well, if it's so bad, why don't you just leave? But anyone who has been through this knows it's not that simple. When you've been given a taste of love and belonging, if your brain remembers it, you keep chasing it, believing it's still in there somewhere, like a treasure you just have to dig deeper to find. If you replay the good moments in your mind, the laughter, the tenderness, the promises, and you convince yourself that if you just do the right thing, say the right words, or prove yourself enough, the person you fell for will return. That hope is what keeps good people locked in. But here's the hard truth. The love you're chasing was never real, it was bait, it was a mask. And once you can accept that, painful as it is, you begin to see the pattern for what it really is, manipulation, not connection. This is where daily life offers us another example. Imagine you buy a new pair of shoes online. The pictures are stunning, sleek, stylish, perfect. They arrive, and for the first few days, you're thrilled. But soon the sole starts peeling off, the stitching unravels, and the shoes are cutting into your feet. Yet, because of how good they looked at the start, you keep wearing them, hoping they'll somehow break in. But deep down, you know they won't. They're poorly made. The only way to stop the blisters is to stop wearing them. That's what it's like with a narcissist's false love. Beautiful packaging, empty product. And what does this do to a decent person over time? It erodes their sense of self. When you're constantly fed this cycle of hot and cold love and withdrawal, you start to believe you're the problem. You wonder, am I too sensitive? Am I not enough? Did I do something wrong? Before long, if you're no longer standing in your own identity, you're standing in quicksand, sinking deeper every time you try to adjust yourself to please them. If that's the cruelest part, the very qualities that make you a good, decent person like patience, loyalty, and compassion, get twisted into tools of your own captivity. But the good news, the part I want you to hold on to, is this: once you name the trap, it begins to lose its power. When you can look at the cycle and say, this isn't love, it's control, you start to shift the story. You stop seeing yourself as broken, and start seeing the truth, that you were targeted because of your strength, not your weakness. A narcissist doesn't pick someone who has nothing to give. They pick someone overflowing with goodness, because that's what they can drain. So when you find yourself remembering the good times, craving that early affection, stop and ask, was that love, or was it bait? Was it connection, or was it conditioning? Every time you ask that question, you loosen the chain a little more, and eventually, step by step, you walk free. Because here's the ultimate truth: if real love doesn't make you question your worth, real love doesn't keep you guessing. Real love doesn't use your loyalty as leverage. If what you're feeling does, then it isn't love at all. It's a trap dressed as love. And you deserve far more than a trap. When you're caught in the web of trauma bonding with a narcissist, the most dangerous damage isn't what they do to your relationship, it's what they do to your sense of self. At the beginning, you may feel strong, confident, grounded in who you are. But slowly, almost invisibly, that confidence starts to fade. It's like a slow leak in a tire. You don't notice right away, but before long you're running on empty. And this erosion of self-worth doesn't happen with one big, dramatic event. It's the accumulation of small, subtle moments that chip away at your identity until you barely recognize yourself. Take an everyday example. Imagine a student who once loved to draw. Every time they created something, they felt alive. Then they had a teacher who, instead of encouraging them, found small faults in everything. The lines are uneven. The colors don't match. You should do it this way instead. The student might start to doubt their talent, even if they were once confident. Over time, they might stop drawing altogether, not because they lost the ability, but because their joy has been overshadowed by self-doubt. That's what a narcissist does to a decent person. They don't attack you head on. They chip at your foundation until you start to question your own worth. The narcissist knows exactly how to do this. They'll dismiss your feelings with little phrases like, you're overreacting, or you're too sensitive. They'll mock your opinions or ignore your successes. And while each comment on its own might seem small, when they're repeated over weeks, months, or years, they accumulate. Slowly, the voice of the narcissist becomes the voice in your own head. You start doubting your instincts, your decisions, your dreams. The cruelest part is you begin to wonder if maybe they're right about you. Think about how many people have sat in a relationship and said things like, maybe I am too emotional, or maybe I do expect too much. Those thoughts aren't natural, they're planted. They grow because someone has been watering them with criticism, dismissiveness, or silence. A narcissist wants you uncertain because when you're uncertain, you're easier to control. It's like a sculptor working with clay. At first, the clay has its own natural shape and form, but the sculptor keeps pressing, pushing, cutting away until the clay becomes what they want. In a toxic relationship, the narcissist is that sculptor, except they're not shaping you into something beautiful. They're shaping you into someone smaller, quieter, less confident, less likely to stand up for yourself. And because you're decent and loyal, you try to mold yourself to their preferences, thinking that if you just change enough, the love will come back. But here's the devastating part: the more you shrink, the more they demand. It's never enough. They take your willingness to compromise as permission to take more. You lose touch with your own boundaries because you're constantly walking on eggshells, wondering what will set them off today. And when you live like that long enough, your self-worth doesn't just fade, it feels stolen. Let's use another daily example. Imagine you have a friend who borrows your phone charger once. No big deal. Then they borrow it every time they visit. Soon, they stop asking and just take it. Before you know it, your charger isn't even in your house anymore, it's always with them. That's what a narcissist does with your confidence. At first, they only take small bits of it, making you second guess one choice, one opinion. But little by little, if they take more and more until your confidence isn't even yours anymore, it's in their hands, because now you measure yourself by how they see you. And this erosion of self-worth bleeds into every corner of your life, you might notice yourself pulling back from friends, because you don't want to explain what's happening. You might stop pursuing goals you once cared about because you've been told they don't matter. Even small daily decisions like what to wear or what to say become loaded with fear. You think, will this upset them? Will this make me look stupid? Will this give them another reason to criticize me? And when you're living like that, you're not living at all. You're surviving. The heartbreaking irony is that decent people often hold on longer because they remember who they used to be. They think, I used to feel strong. I used to be joyful. Maybe if I just love harder, I'll get back to that place. But what they don't realize is that the very act of doubting themselves is proof of the erosion that has already taken place. It's not their lack of strength that keeps them stuck, it's the way their strength has been misused against them. Their patience becomes their prison. But there's something powerful in recognizing this. When you finally see that the erosion of self-worth wasn't your fault, that it was engineered, step by step, by someone who benefited from your doubt, you begin to reclaim it. You begin to remember that your worth isn't up for debate. It isn't something anyone else gets to define. Think about a mirror that's been fogged up in a bathroom after a hot shower. At first, you can't see your reflection at all. But as the fog clears slowly, the outline of your face comes back into view. That's what healing feels like. Your self-worth is never gone. It may be hidden under layers of fog, but it's still there waiting to be seen again. And the moment you realize that the fog was placed there by someone else, you stop blaming yourself for not being able to see clearly. When a narcissist has chipped away at your identity, leaving you questioning your value, remember this: your worth doesn't vanish just because someone refused to see it. You are still the same person you were before the erosion began, capable, kind, resilient. The journey back isn't about becoming someone new, it's about peeling away the lies and rediscovering the truth you already carry inside. Breaking free from a trauma bond with a narcissist is not simply about walking away, it's about walking back in yourself. For so long, your mind has been twisted into believing that the pain was love, that the manipulation was care, and that if you just tried harder, things would get better. But the turning point comes the day you realize that what you thought was love was actually control, and in that moment, the path to freedom begins. It's important to understand that breaking free isn't a single act, like closing a door and never looking back. It's a process. One that often feels like taking off a pair of glasses you've been wearing for years, only to realize the lenses were tinted the whole time. Suddenly, the world looks different. And at first, that clarity can be terrifying, because if it wasn't love, if it wasn't genuine, then what was it? And what does that say about all the time you invested, all the hope you carried? That's where courage comes in, the courage to stop searching for answers in the narcissist's behavior, and instead, start building answers in your own life. Think about a person who's been living in a noisy house next to a busy highway. At first, the sound of cars rushing by is overwhelming, even unbearable, but after a while, the noise blends into the background. They stop noticing it because their brain adjusts. That's what happens when you live under the control of a narcissist. The constant criticism, the unpredictability, the emotional roller coasters, it becomes your normal. You don't even realize how heavy it is until you step away. And that first moment of silence, that first deep breath of peace can feel foreign. You may even miss the noise because it's what you got used to. But peace, once you taste it, is what teaches you what freedom really feels like. Breaking free begins with naming the truth, naming that what you endured was not love. Naming that your needs, your voice, your worth were not respected. Naming that staying in that cycle will only lead to more of the same. That honesty is like turning on a light in a dark room. The furniture didn't move. It was always there. But now you can see clearly and you stop bumping into the same things over and over. A daily life example helps bring this home. Imagine you're holding a rope in a tug of war. the person on the other side keeps pulling and you're straining, sweating, giving every ounce of strength just to keep your footing. As long as you hold on, if the struggle continues. But what happens if you simply let go of the rope? The fight ends instantly, not because the other person stopped pulling, but because you chose not to participate anymore. That's what it means to break free from a trauma bond. You don't win by overpowering the narcissist. You win by choosing not to play their game anymore. Of course, letting go is easier said than done. The bond feels like glue, like chains, like gravity itself. If you remember the rare good moments, the flashes of tenderness, the promises of change, those memories whisper, maybe it could work if I stay a little longer. But here's the truth. Those moments are not proof of love. They're tools of control. They are the breadcrumbs that keep you circling the same empty trail. And once you recognize them for what they are, their power begins to dissolve. Freedom also means reclaiming your dignity. When you've been dismissed and belittled for so long, standing up and saying, I matter, feels revolutionary. It can be as simple as setting small boundaries, not answering every call, not defending yourself against every accusation, not explaining your worth to someone who is determined not to see it. Each boundary is like laying a brick, and over time, those bricks become the foundation of a new, stronger version of yourself. Think of it like a garden. If a weed has taken over choking your plants, you can't just trim the top and hope for the best. You have to dig it out from the roots. At first, the soil resists. It takes effort, maybe even pain. But once the weed is gone, the ground is free again, ready for new life to grow. Breaking free from a narcissist is the same. It requires pulling the bond out from the roots, even when it hurts, so that your life can flourish again. And here's the most inspiring part, the very qualities that were used against you, your loyalty, your kindness, your patience, are the same qualities that will fuel your healing. The difference is this time you direct them inward. You become loyal to yourself. You show kindness to yourself. You extend patience to yourself as you rebuild. And with each step, you prove that the narcissist didn't destroy you, they revealed your resilience. When you finally taste that freedom, it's like walking out of a dark tunnel and realizing the sun was shining the whole time. At first, the light feels blinding. You squint, you hesitate. But then you lift your head, breathe deeply, and realize the world is wide open again. You are no longer chained to someone else's approval. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's moods. You no longer confuse pain with passion. And the greatest victory is this: you don't just survive. You rise, you step back into life with a deeper wisdom, a clearer vision, and a heart that, though scarred, still beats with courage. Because breaking free isn't just about leaving a toxic bond behind. It's about stepping into the truth that you deserve a love that is steady, respectful, and real. And most importantly, you deserve to give that love to yourself first.